It is the O Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, CW. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to hit that bell on YouTube and subscribe to the podcast on any and all platforms. Today, we're talking about championships that were props. What does that mean? It means everything. The championships are all props, honestly, but some have more cachet than others. Obviously, the heavyweight championship, the women's championship, the tag team titles to an extent. But there are some titles that have been introduced that I feel were, I don't know, they kind of not muddied the waters, but they definitely existed to kind of facilitate a single person or potentially ride out an existing gimmick or something. I'll give you an example. The Cruiserweight Championship from back in the day, the one that X-Pac used to hold, I feel that title was very much a prop for who Vince considered the smaller guys. It didn't get the same sort of love that other titles got, so much so that it was retired like 3 times. It came in, it was retired. I think the Attitude Era brought it back, and then they retired it again. Then, 205 Live came about, and then it became the main title on that show, and nobody watched that show, so they retired it again. It was a big purple belt, I think. But at least in 205 Live, it was being used as like a divisional title, right? But when it was on Raw, way back in the day, it just felt like an ancillary prop that smaller guys, quote unquote smaller, again, they're way bigger than me, smaller guys would carry around during matches, and you're like, oh, he has an accolade, he's the Cruiserweight champ. But it didn't really mean a whole lot because there weren't people clamoring to get this Cruiserweight championship. Nobody was fighting tooth and nail to get it, except for like X-Pac and I don't know, someone else, I can't remember. But that's kind of what I mean. And something else on that vein is the Hardcore title. Now, I think the Hardcore Championship, the original one that with the smashed belt that was all duct tape up, that was 100% 50 a prop. But it was booked so well that it became a legitimate championship. I don't think it was a joke, but it was definitely in jest where they broke up a title and then, taped it together and gave it to, who was it, Mankind or something? And the booking for that title was really good, or at least consistent. Let's not say really good. The booking was consistent where they would hold hardcore matches for the title, and people started getting in on it. Hardcore Holly, Crash Holly, Steve Blackman, you name it. Then when Crash took the next step where he made it a 24/7 championship, which we'll get to in a minute, and the vignettes of him in the airport getting tackled to get pinned for the Hardcore Championship, or him in a hotel room sprinting out in his underwear, it was all fresh and new. That was something that had never been done before, and it gave that title some legitimacy. And it also, and I think this goes to what I think Gangrel said in an interview, it gave people like an angle. It gave people something to chase. It gave them their wins. Their wins mattered back in the Attitude Era. Everyone had sort of something they were working towards, except for the Cruiserweight title. I still don't think anyone was looking for that. But people were chasing that Hardcore title, which I still think was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek wrestling title. But the booking around it made it legitimate. On a lesser note, the 24/7 championship is just a toy. It was a toy, and R-Truth did his best to make it interesting. And honestly, his run as 24/7 champ was some of the most fun wrestling, goofy wrestling stuff that happened a couple years ago. Once it left his hands and it was on literally anyone else, it was a joke. And it was a prop to be passed around. So much so it was such a tiny, skinny belt. It was almost, it looked like they were carrying around some kid's belt. No one really enjoyed that 24/7 run, especially that they were handing the title to celebrities and ex-wrestlers and just weirdos, it took away a lot of the legitimacy in the title, which made it seem less appealing. And everyone just was tired of it at some point. I think there was a vignette where Jeff Hardy inexplicably was chasing the 24/7 title. He was in the pack of wrestlers who, weren't doing anything, and they were just trying to get the 24. And I think it was one time. It was so disheartening to see the likes of Jeff Hardy in that pack of like Tozawa, not taking anything away from Tozawa and Reggie probably, or whoever was in that strange assortment of people. But Jeff Hardy was like a marquee guy, and to see him chasing the 24/7 title, it was almost like a demotion, or he was getting not ribbed, but like punished for something strange. But yeah, that title, they even threw it away on national television and missed the garbage can. That's how bad the title was. They didn't even bother to get it in the can. I'm sure they were supposed to, but Nikki Cross missed, and someone else came by and picked it up and threw it away. Another prop title. Please excuse me. Oh my goodness, I'm so congested. Another prop title, which I hate to say, is the Women's Tag Team Championships, and this is solely based on the booking around that title. There is no consistency within that championship whatsoever. Since it was introduced, it's been passed around indiscriminately and defended even less. The Damage Control won those titles, and I think they defended it 3 times in like 6 months or something like that. The titles were then given to Becky Lynch and Lita being an ex-wrestler, and then they didn't defend it. Lita didn't even get to defend her title. She had to take an L, and then Trish Stratus walked in. It was all obviously to facilitate that angle, the Becky Lynch versus Trish Stratus at SummerSlam. But now those titles are on Raquel and Liv, another kind of makeshift tag team that doesn't, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, they do make sense. It's a very big woman with a very small woman. They can do stuff like the fastball special. I think she did like a power bomb where she tossed Liv outside the ring at people, which is interesting. I was always a fan of Wolverine and Cyclops as a team. So that team actually makes a little sense. They didn't come together in any meaningful way, but them being together makes sense. But my question is, where does this tag team go now? Who are they going to drop the belts to? Because that's all those belts seem to be there for, is to drop it to a different team. I think Shayna Baszler and Ronda Rousey are the people who are at least most set up to have those titles and, be a dominant women's tag team. Becky Lynch and Lita, we all knew that was some transitional nonsense, because come on, Lita's not a full-time wrestler. Becky Lynch is not a tag team wrestler. She's, going to move on to whoever, Becky or Rhea or whoever. But yeah, Liv and Raquel having it makes sense. But if they drop it in a month to a different team, what is the point of those titles? It's just a way to facilitate storylines around it, not necessarily for it, right? And I think that's why Naomi and Sasha walked out. That's why originally Bayley and Sasha were having a fit about their titles and losing them to the Iconics. It just wasn't being booked well. But at least when they lost it to the Iconics were a legitimate women's tag team, a thing that's super rare in WWE to begin with. Just a tag team of 2 ladies who are out there working together all the time, kind of like the Bellas. But who else is like that these days? Anyway, what other championship titles do you feel were props in the WWE or any other promotion? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the O Wrestling Podcast. We are marching towards number 100. Can't wait to see you there. Anyway, tell a friend about the show, and don't you ever forget.
I'm your friend, but if I ever see you in the ring, I can beat you. Don't you know? Yeah, yeah, yeah.